So this is a follow-up from my angry video, which is a message to white South Africans, or at least the majority of them. I'm not sure when I'm going to drop this, so please excuse whenever this gets dropped, and I will drop a link in the bottom, regardless of when you watch this, of the link to the other video. I've been on Twitter for a chunk of today, and I'm still a bit perturbed by the issue of Andre de Ruyter, who's the ex-CEO of Eskom, who has officially been asked to leave with immediate effect, and supposed defense by white South Africans in particular of Andre de Ruyter, and how they do not see their racism and how they defend blindly defend the DA and blindly defend an Andre de Ruyter. Some of us are non-racialist, but I'll tell you, look, to be honest, I'm a, what's it called, a recovering alcoholic. I'm a recovering pro-black activist. What that means is I was very pro-black. I was very, look, for a period of my life, I think I was non-racialist, primary, high school, then I got to varsity at Rhodes. I was exposed to black South African history. I was exposed to African history. I got to study the Bantu Bigos, the Mangaliso Sobukwes, the struggle, you know, of apartheid. Studied the rest of the world, of course, Marcus Garvey's Malcolm X, Elijah Muhammad, Martin Luther King Jr., and others, you know, and the slave trade, of course. And I found myself getting very angry, which should happen to anyone who is being exposed to information pertaining himself or his people. And then from there, I started seeing all the signs. You know, when you start figuring out that everything is driven by capitalism and making money, everything, you start realizing the concept of sending your child to school is so that they can go and work for the company for peanuts. The reason politicians say the things they say so that they can make a lot of money. The reason when you go to a doctor, the doctor prescribes certain medicines is so that they can make money. The reason we're not teaching our children how to cook is so that you can go buy takeaways. Everything, Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, Father's Day, Christmas, everything is geared towards making money for an elite few. So for me, I started seeing all these signs of arguably white supremacy and the oppression of the black man and black mindsets, to a point where today I'm speaking to you in English, which is a language I can only speak because we were colonized, not by choice, by the British. Today I dress in these Western European clothing of a t-shirt and the like, whereas we used to wear mabeshu, as a Zulu man at least, and obviously we generally be topless and enjoy the sun in Africa because it's warm. And everything about the way I move and I think has got to do with money. Everything's got to do with following a Roman Dutch law which was forced onto Africans. Everything has got to do with chasing this ideal of living and succeeding within a Western framework. Our measure of success and happiness is not premised on land and being in touch with nature and your sense of peace and how well you get along with your family and how much you love yourself and how much time you spend with your children. It is premised on how much money you have, which means how well have you mastered the system. And once you make a lot of money, inevitably, it means that there are many other people below that you are taking money from so that you can be rich. So I became pro-black, and in that I created the Buy Black movement. And creating the Buy Black movement, I was like, look, all these better leaders than me that came before me tried in different ways to uplift the black nation and the Africans in particular. And I wanted to try something different. And when I look at the nations that I admired, the Indian Muslims, the white Jewish people, some of the Chinese, and some of the white Afrikaners in South Africa, which are a great blueprint, I was like, where these guys won is they found a value system that made sense and they got people to buy into it. For white Afrikaners, it was not just race, because it could have just been white South Africans. But they said you have to be Afrikaner. You must speak the Afrikaans language. You must indulge in Afrikaner culture, etc. And they managed to uplift themselves from being downtrodden by the British, white British people. If you look at the Indian Muslims, they've got halal, they've got the Quran, they've got Islam. If you look at white Jewish people, they've got the Torah, they've got kosher as an example. So I was like, for black people, because we are dark-skinned, what if we buy from other black people aggressively so, and almost like halal and kosher say, if your business is not black, we will not buy because this is sinning against my race. And not only buy, but work. If I'm not working for a black-owned business, I am sinning against my race. I tried it for a while and I realized that the issues that black people have are way deeper than I can assist. That's the first part. The second part is I realized race and skin is not enough. You know, I just made an example of white Afrikaner. White people are not united, as black people would like to think. You've got white Afrikaans people, you've got white English people. Right now, you've got a white Russia versus a white Ukraine. You've got a white America that sometimes fights against a white whatever. Can go to Asia, where you've got North and South Korea that were fighting and they ended up being split. You've got other nations there in Asia that have fought. You look at the Indians, you've got the Muslims, you've got the Hindus, etc. So people are not united on race. It's easy to unite on race versus another race. But that is not a sustainable value system. And I realized that the people that last for longer are the ones that have a shared value system. What does that mean? It means you and I are black, but you are Christian and I'm Muslim. You and I are black, but I believe in African spirituality and you believe in Buddhism. You and I are black, but you support the ANC and I support the DA. You and I are black, but you live in suburbia and I live in the townships. You and I are black, but you buy from these businesses and I buy from those businesses. So our value systems are not the same. And I decided to leave being pro-black and I moved to being non-racialist. I think it is more sustainable and it allows me to go beyond surface level where it is easy for black people who are serving foreign and destructive agendas for me to see through them and not just blindly support a black person, but support a person who shares my values. So for example, if I'm a South African, proudly South African as an example, I will support anyone else who is proudly South African, whether they're black, white, Indian, Chinese, whatever. As long as I know when I support them, they keep the money here. They invest in the schools and education system here. They invest in infrastructure here. They care about South Africa winning. As soon as I support someone who is pro-American, pro-Chinese, pro-German, I'm like, I can't support you because when I support you with my money and my labor, I am uplifting China, America, Germany, and I'm weakening my people. But that's patriotism to your nation. I want to be patriotic to my value system, and mine is penalism. I've written a beautiful book, I think, if I may say so myself. I've written a very beautiful book on penalism principles, which highlight my value system. It is not a racial value system. It is not a national value system. It is not a gender value system. It is not a sexuality value system. It is a generic value system where I say these are the things I believe in. And then for other people that share some, most, or all of my values, let's come together, let's work, and let's win. And that's what I want to do. White South Africans are not there. They're still stuck in being white, whether they realize it or not. And in their decision making and the way they view things and the way they criticize, they don't realize the mistake they're making. On Twitter today, there was someone defending Andre de Ruyter and he said, yeah, but look at what the black leaders before him did and they destroyed Eskom and whatever the case may be. Part of the articles that I read was saying things like, and I think Andre de Ruyter has said that he's going to be leaving South Africa. I remember tweeting, please can you take Cyril Ramaphosa and Pravin Gordhan with, wherever you're going overseas, batate, take them. And mind you, Pravin is Indian and Cyril is black. But this person was defending, and one of the questions I asked in one of the articles, when they were speaking about Andre de Ruyter and they were saying, look, he was put in a tough position, it was never going to work politically. I said, why did you not give black leaders of Eskom the same benefits of the doubt? Why didn't you say that they struggled because of political interference? They struggled because of sabotage. They struggled because someone has a privatization agenda. Then people went and said, yeah, but these guys weren't maintaining Eskom. That is such a lie. Again, you can go on Google and you can research the maintenance work Matsila Koko, Brian Molefe were doing and other people before them. They stopped load shedding for 2 years. And not only did they stop load shedding, but Eskom became profitable. Not to say Eskom was perfect, but they were trying to solve the problems given to them as their mandate. Andre de Ruyter not only failed to do that, but we've had the worst load shedding ever. Our debt is, I think, at currently 420 billion, and the government has just approved a 245 billion rand bailout of sorts. Load shedding is at its worst. The power stations are horrendous. Under Omatsila, no Brian, of course, the power stations building got inflated. But now that reminds me of something, the construction cartels that went and price fixed and colluded to build the soccer stadiums for the World Cup in 2010. These are not black-owned businesses. These are white-owned businesses. Of course, they have black faces here and there, politically connected people on their boards. But these are white businesses, but no one ever says, oh, look at the rampant corruption by these people. Similarly, when you look at Eskom, we need to ask who is building the power stations. Because I did ask with this Andre thing, if Andre is saying 1 billion rand was being stolen from Eskom every month, who was stealing it? Because if he's not going to tell us, but he knows it was being stolen, he is now complicit in a crime. He's an accessory of crime, and he is preventing justice from prevailing. Of course, we had Babita Deokaran, I'm not sure of her surname, who was in health, who ended up being killed because she was a whistleblower in the health department and she exposed corruption. She was killed. And if Andre de Ruyter is scared of being taken out, I understand. But then he shouldn't even speak about the 1 billion at all, because that already compromises him. Because there was the case now recently of him potentially being poisoned. Why mention it at all if you're scared? But if you're not scared, then get out with it, because that means you know something and you should be brought to court or to a commission to tell us who is stealing money. We've got Cyril Ramaphosa, whose company Shanduga works with Glencore to supply coal to Eskom. Cyril Ramaphosa, whose company Shanduga is linked to Glencore's fuel company Astron, which I think is taking over Caltex if I'm not mistaken. Astron supplies diesel to Eskom. Who is stealing the money? This is also important, not just for Eskom, but for the whole country. Who are the biggest tenderpreneurs? As far as we know, a tenderpreneur are these black guys. Hey, Chief Kader. Hey, we'll meet at Konka with Cubana Chief. Let's go to Dubai. Who are the biggest tenderpreneurs in this country? Who makes the most money from Eskom? How are they getting that money? Who are the biggest coal mine suppliers to Eskom and who owns them? Because you'll find that while we think corruption is black, the biggest corruption is actually white. But no one wants to speak about that because, again, some white people blindly want to defend whiteness with everything they have, even when the facts and the data is blatantly there. But you want to say, oh, it's the black people and the ANC. Who are the biggest funders to the ANC? Who are the biggest funders to Cyril Ramaphosa? Who are the biggest beneficiaries of government from a tender perspective? Who are the biggest beneficiaries of Eskom collapsing? Who are getting the IPP licenses? And I know Patrice Motsepe and Johan Rupert have gotten them. Who are the biggest beneficiaries of IPP license? Who are the people making the most money now with solar panels, with generators, with diesel? Are those generally black people? You'd be surprised once you see that hard data. And unfortunately, a lot of our newspapers and mainstream media will not go and take that data and show it to us. The same way they used to track coronavirus stats every day. Show us who are the biggest beneficiaries, companies in this country from tenders. I know Bidvest is somewhere at the top. I know Aspen is somewhere there at the top because they roll out a big chunk of the ARVs and the COVID vaccines now. And Aspen is white Jewish owned and they funded Cyril. And Bidvest is white Jewish owned and Cyril used to sit on their board. So who's the clown now? Shanduga is being babysat by Pembani. Pembani is being run by a gentleman called Phuthuma Nhleko. Phuthuma Nhleko used to be the chairman of MTN. But Phuthuma Nhleko are also shareholders in Engen. Phuthuma Nhleko are also involved in some of the businesses that benefit from government, from some of the moving around. We can't speak about those things because no, those are good black people. They speak well, they seasoned businessmen. It must be the clumsy Zuma, Malusi Kikaba, Matsila Kokos, these clumsy RAT people. Because you buy into media propaganda and you don't realize that by doing that, you're buying into racism. Because the stats and the facts and the data are there. But you don't want to engage it because it doesn't suit an agenda and a narrative. Anyways, this guy Usizwe Mbokazi on Twitter responds to this white person who's challenging me on Andre de Ruyter after we've told him, go and look at the data. And he says, this guy Usizwe Mbokazi, he says, it is always funny with you people. You like that one, you people? Speak about white people. It's always funny with you people because you always want to point at the past leaders of Eskom as being the reason why Eskom is failing. And you will defend the incumbents being Andre de Ruyter. And I think the chief operating officer, I don't know if it's Oberholzer. Oberholzer. Sy naam is Oberholzer. the chief operating officer. They will defend the incumbents and say, no, but it was the people before them. And he says, but white people get angry and defensive when black people do the same, where they say the reason this country is poor and struggling is because of a white apartheid government and not the incumbents being the black ANC government. White people will very quickly say, but it's the ANC. And black people say it's apartheid. And you're like, but that was a long time ago. But then when it comes to Eskom, very conveniently, you're not going to say, well, it's Andre Terreira. He's in charge now. No, it's the black people before. Again, the hypocrisy, the racism, the cognitive dissonance. So it's very upsetting. And for the rest of us who are non-racial, at the very least, we're going to suffer. And I need you guys to understand, many black people are carrying trauma every single day. Trauma from apartheid. Yes, the apartheid government and other white funders have given them this ANC, which is a buffer between angry blacks and rich white people. Same with the EFF. Julius Malema said it in an interview. He is a buffer between angry blacks and some of the privileged, including himself. They are a buffer. They are security guards. They are manchingelanes. They are the border police between angry poor black people and the rich elite, which is mostly white, a lot of Indians, and then some black people. So here we are now, and black people with that trauma refuse to vote for a white-led party by a John Steenhuisen, by a, who's the leader of Freedom Front Plus? It's not Mulder. Is it Mulder? Because Peter Groenewald is Peter Groenewald Freedom Front? Anyways, whoever's in charge of the Freedom Front, they refuse. Even if white people can prove we are better at governance, we can show you our performance measurement. The trauma that black people are carrying, they refuse. It's the same way a white Afrikaner somewhere who's passionately Afrikaans will refuse to support a Pommy, a white British leader somewhere, and say, fuck that, I will never support because he's not Afrikaans. And why an Indian Muslim will say, is he Muslim? If he is not, I will not support him. I would rather support this Muslim who is not that great because he shares my values and I will build with him. So what's going to happen come elections 2024, while the DA and other white people are making a noise and saying, oh, look at load shedding, look at the potholes, the ANC is destroying everything, don't vote ANC. Black people are going to be sitting listening to what these white people are saying, looking at the fact that you live in suburbia with your solar panels, sending your kids to private schools, using private healthcare, and say, no, the only reason you want to remove the ANC is to maintain your privilege. And we refuse to do that. And in my last video, I explained that for many black people, the ANC came at grants, child grants, disability grants, RDPs, NSFAS, the National Empowerment Fund, the National Youth Development Agency, the IDC. Today, normal black people can get into tenders, which they couldn't do before. Black people are professionals in spaces they couldn't be in before. Black people get to sit on boards of companies. They get to be partners in companies. They get to do things they couldn't do before. And they're saying, if you are DA, you want to take us back to apartheid. And I'm telling you now, there are black people in this country who would rather have a total blackout. They would rather Eskom collapses to the ground and we don't have potholes, but we have huge craters of holes in the streets. They would rather have that than have white leadership in this country. That's how deep the trauma and the racism is. And as long as white people, white South Africans, refuse to take themselves out of their privilege and visit informal settlements and visit townships and sit with black people and truly try to understand, why do you not want to vote for a white leader? Why do you not see what the ANC is doing? Why do you have issues with Cyril? Until you take yourself out of yourself and put yourself in the shoes of, because you must understand, those black people are going to be the majority of the voters. They get to swing the vote heavily. And if you're not, as a DA, as a Freedom Front Plus, as an Action SA, as a Build One SA, if you're not willing to speak their language, if you're not willing to listen to them, to understand, they will never vote for you. They would rather this country turn into a form of Zimbabwe. They would rather let this country burn than let white people run it again. And white people absolutely refuse to understand it, because from privilege, like, but how stupid can you be? You keep voting for the same people. You think they're stupid because you refuse to sit with them and listen to them. Once you sit and listen and understand, you will then be able to try and win them, because when you speak to them, you will speak with a deep understanding and explain why it is important for them to vote differently. And what's interesting is once you do that, you will begin understanding why the DA, Freedom Front Plus, are very dangerous political parties for the average poor black South African. Something to think about. Penuel the Black Pen. Sharp.